Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I'm your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I was given the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. During each episode, we'll be talking about a story from Indian mythology, followed by a Character of the Week segment. This week, we'll learn the strange story of how poetry was invented and about how a god can upload memories directly into people. This episode is the beginning of the Ramayana. The Ramayana is one of the two most famous epics from India. I would not be exaggerating in saying that the Ramayana and the other epic, the Mahabharata, are known by almost every single person in India, thanks to a combination of school curriculum, books, TV series, and movies. The saga itself is pretty big. The original version of the poem, called the Valmiki Ramayana, had 24,000 verses in it. We are going to begin today, and it will take several episodes to go through these. Because the Ramayana is just one of several wonderful stories from India, I'll spread these episodes out a bit so that there's a bit of variety, but I'll go through all of them in order. The character this week is a girl who abducts a prince to avoid marrying his cousin. Valmiki was a fisherman highwayman. You might wonder, how does that work exactly? Did he specialize in robbing only fishermen? Or did he only rob fish? The answer is that he was just a robber, but his business card said fisherman. Kind of like how the Godfather was an olive oil importer. Even back in those days, you needed a front for any illegal business. So if the authorities found you, you could explain your way out of a pickle. So we'll leave the fisherman part aside and simply think of him as a highwayman. But seeing as it was around 800 BC, there wasn't much of a highway. Regardless, Valmiki would waylay travelers and steal their valuables. One fine morning, as Valmiki was out looking for his next victims, he saw two wise men. Almost not worth the effort, he thought. But then, nothing ventured, nothing gained. He jumped in front of them suddenly. "Your money or your lives," he said. It was fashionable for rishis to swear off all worldly possessions, and these two rishis were no exceptions. "We have no money," they said. "Take our lives if you must." "That's not exactly how this works," said Valmiki. "I meant I'd take your lives if you refuse to hand over your money. But if you don't have any money, I actually feel sorry for you. How are you managing in this rough country?" The rishis said, "It's not as bad as it seems. We sing and walk along the streets and people give us food." "And you don't have to pay for that?" said Valmiki, quite incredulously. "Not a penny," said the rishis. "People are doing this to be closer to God, and they don't mind sharing their food with uninvited guests like us. It's practically built into their moral code." Valmiki was a keen observer and could read between the lines. "So are they just paying you to stop singing?" he said. "Or maybe they are actually interested in your words." "Definitely the latter," the rishis said. "So what do you actually sing about?" Valmiki asked. "We mostly sing about gods. Those are our real valuables, our real possessions." "Tell me about these gods you speak of," said Valmiki. And the rishis did, in great detail. So much so that Valmiki decided to give up his life of crime, and he became a devotee of Ram. Ram is the seventh avatar of Vishnu. We previously covered the first avatar, the unicorn fish, in the very first episode. You may want to check it out if you haven't already, but the avatars are fairly independent of each other. Valmiki spent a long time meditating and praying and was finally rewarded with a vision of the life of Ram. He composed it into what we know as the Ramayana. Valmiki himself is an important character in the Ramayana. In the very first chapter, Valmiki writes how he heard the synopsis of Ram's story from, wait for it, me. Yes, he heard it from me. Valmiki asked me to name a person who does basically everything great, cares about following all rules, is fair to everyone, and rules his kingdom well. Obviously, without any hesitation, I said that person is Ram. At this point, I gave Valmiki a very concise summary of Ram's life. But we can skip that synopsis because, spoilers, Chapter 2 begins with me bidding Valmiki goodbye. Don't ask me how I know what happens next, because I knew it would happen before it happened, and I saw it happen again when it did. Sounds confusing, right? Remember, my superpower is that I know the past, the present, and the future. Anyway, so Valmiki wandered about the forest, definitely not looking for people to hold up. He saw a couple of birds, cranes or crouch as they were called. The birds were just being friendly with each other when out of the blue a hunter shot one of them with an arrow. Valmiki flew into a terrible rage and said to the hunter, "You shall never be prosperous. Don't enter the forest for many years." Only he said it in Sanskrit and made it sound a lot better than I did. So much better that the significance wasn't lost on Valmiki. He immediately followed up. "What is this phrase I've just uttered? I think I have invented a new form of poetry. And the length of my mini poem exactly fits a veena." A veena is an ancient Indian guitar. I carry one all the time. Remember, I'm a traveling musician. The hunter, noticing Valmiki's surprise, said, "Your mood suddenly seems to have changed. So, does that mean I can come back to the forest all I want? Faults on both sides, water under the bridge?" "Nope," said Valmiki. "It's too late. I've already cursed you. And curses don't have an undo feature yet. That's in a future upgrade if you want to stick around for, a few centuries or so." Valmiki proclaimed that it would bring him great fame, and no one will think worse of him for inventing this. I'm pretty sure he's right about the former, but I defer to millions and millions of Indian school children on the latter. Valmiki then went back home and prayed. Not long after, Brahma, who was in the habit of making house calls, showed up. Brahma, if you haven't heard earlier episodes, is part of the Holy Trinity. He's the creator, whereas Vishnu is the preserver and Shiva is the destroyer. And Brahma is also my dad. Valmiki promptly told Brahma about the incident with the crouch from earlier in the day, being sure to elaborate on his poem. Brahma, who seemed to have a good eye for literary talent, encouraged him. "Let's start calling that poetry from now on." "Deal," Valmiki said. Brahma continued, "On a completely unrelated note, I want you to tell the story of Ram that you heard from my son Narad earlier today. I'll send you a copy of the entire story, direct to your mind." And that's exactly what Valmiki got. As he prayed, he got to know Sri Ram's entire life story. Now, I don't know why it took so long for him to get the hint from Brahma, but it then occurred to him, hey, I invented poetry, and on the very same day, I was asked by Brahma to spread the message of Ram. I could just as easily write Ram's story in the same form as the one I invented. That would be killing two birds with one stone. Oops, bad choice of a metaphor there. In what is probably the earliest reference of breaking the fourth wall, Valmiki is described as composing his classic, including chapter 4, which describes Valmiki composing his classics, including chapter 4, which includes... Forget it, this is just infinite recursion. So anyway, after he finished composing the Ramayana, he wondered, to whom should I teach this classic? He's already calling it a classic. The obvious answer is to the whole world. The second most obvious answer was the two young boys, Love and Kush, who lived in his hermitage. You're in for a double plot twist now. Ram, upon whom the entire Ramayana is based, was still currently the king of Ayodhya. And the two young boys, Love and Kush, they were Ram's sons, who didn't know they were King Ram's sons. Way to bury the lead here, Valmiki. We'll later get into why they were living with Valmiki. Anyway, Valmiki decided to teach the two princes all about their parents without revealing that Ram was their father. The boys were great musicians and could play the veena really well. And Valmiki told them the measures, notes, and exactly how to tune their veenas to give the best concert ever. And Love and Kush did exactly that. They took their veenas, went to King Ram's palace, and sang the story to King Ram's wise men. Now I did a quick back of the envelope calculation. If you estimate 8 to 10 verses a minute, which is a rather fast pace, it would have taken them 2 days to sing out the whole Ramayana without any breaks. Everyone at Ram's court loved their sweet voices and loved the story. They gifted Love and Kush with delicious fruits, because who wouldn't be hungry after a 2-day concert? And Love and Kush also received antelope skins and clothes made of tree bark, because those were in vogue back in the day. The other gift was axes, which is just a weird gift to give to anyone who isn't a lumberjack, and unsafe besides. Now, just as the boys were being praised by the wise men, King Ram happened to be passing by. His curiosity was aroused, so he took the two kids to his chambers and introduced them to his 3 brothers, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna, as well as his ministers. He then commanded them to sing the Ramayana again. Someone has to, offer these kids a chance to rest or something. They've been playing for 2 days straight, and you want them to go through it again? But the kids did it with a smile. This is the jumping off point. We'll stop here, and next week we'll start on the Ramayana as most people know it, which is the story within the Ramayana, obviously condensed because we don't want to be caught in the infinite recursion I mentioned earlier. Some notes on the story. The information about Valmiki's profession as a highwayman/fisherman actually comes from a different source called the Puranas. In another version, it wasn't 2 wise men that Valmiki tried to rob, but me. Valmiki claimed to be doing it to feed his family, but then I challenged him on that, and obviously I won. Shocked that his family did not actually want his tax-free earnings from all the looting and killing people, Valmiki decided to reform. So there are 2 versions, one that Valmiki met the 2 rishis, and the other that he just met me. Only one of these 2 versions is true. I'll let you guess which one. The character this week is Subhadra. She is Krishna and Balram's sister. Krishna was an avatar of Vishnu. In some versions, Balram, who was Krishna's elder brother, was himself an avatar of Vishnu. In some other versions, Balram is an avatar of Seshnag, the ultimate snake, whom you may remember from the unicorn fish episode. Given that both Krishna and Balram had divine origins, you might think Subhadra was the underachiever in the family. But she is herself considered an incarnation of goddess Yogmaya, whom we can talk about in another episode. Prince Arjun, one of the Pandav brothers at the heart of the Mahabharata, and Duryodhan, the crown prince and one of the Kuru brothers, also at the heart of the Mahabharata, both wanted to marry Subhadra. The difference was that Subhadra wanted to be with Arjun. Balram had promised Duryodhan that he could marry Subhadra. Krishna found out about this and warned Arjun and Subhadra. Instead of getting an injunction and challenging Balram's promise in a court of law, he did what was practical. He urged the couple to run away together. But when Duryodhan and Balram find out, won't they just crush me like a bug? Asked Arjun. I can't face them and their armies all by myself. Ever the sneaky one, Krishna suggested that the couple be seen together riding off in a chariot, but with Subhadra driving. This had exactly the effect Krishna wanted. The couple were observed by people in the kingdom, and the same people would later swear to Balram and Duryodhan that Subhadra had abducted Arjun and not the other way around. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll continue the story of the Ramayana, starting from King Dasharath, who was King Ram's father. The character next week is a real historical queen who broke all kinds of stereotypes in defending her people. Since I'm several thousands of years old, my memory may not be perfect at times. So if you see any errors in my podcast, I'd appreciate it if you could point them out to me. If you have any comments or suggestions, you can leave a review on the site. It's sfipodcast.com. The site is also linked in the show notes. You can also tweet at sfipodcast. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. As always, I am grateful to family and friends for all the support and help. And thank you all for listening. The feedback I have received has been very useful. I'll see you next week.